Hello everyone, welcome back. Last we left off, we had just finished the second panel, and now all that's left to do is do the third panel and then set up the recommended tiling that I would do for this type of texture. I've already set that up over here, but we'll jump into that just as soon as we've finished panel 3. So let's just jump straight into it, and hopefully we'll get through this relatively quick. We've got a shape here, which is a square, and then we'll put the scale of the X on 0.88, and then the scale on the Y is on 0.08, and then we've got a disk which is on 0.11 and 0.08 on the Y. Then we're moving these two into position as we normally would. Then you mirror it, and then we can blend those two together with an add linear dodge, and that gives us our sort of shape right here. Then we're just sort of doing a bevel blur sort of thing with the non-uniform blur node. Then we push it through a gradient just to control it a little bit more, give it sort of a harder edge. Then we're using two transformed 2Ds to create the two different variants of this sort of shape. Then once we've done that, we can actually start plugging it into our FX maps. Now this FX map is a little bit different to the last ones we did, but still using the same concept of changing the offset to tile the object. We're just doing it in a slightly different way. So the way this works is it grabs how many iterations there is, and then for every odd number it puts it on the right, and for every even number it puts it on the left. So this is 1, 3 and 5, and this is 2 and 4. So if we just jump in, we can sort of see what equation we're using to do this. So this is the same here, it's just iteration 7.5. If we go on the quadrant node, click edit, then we'll come to here. Now the equation we're using is called modulo or something. Now what that basically does is it will find the remainder of a number if you divide it by 2. So basically what we're doing is we're grabbing the number of iterations here, and then we're casting it into a number. So this would be like 0.01, casting it into an integer to make it a 1. And then we're dividing that by 2, and then it will give us a remainder. If there is a remainder, if there's a remainder of 1, then it will do this function, else it will only do this. So essentially, don't move it at all if it's odd, and move it if it's even. So then we want to push it into our vector 3 as we normally would, and we just change our Y offset as we did before. So once that's done, you just do that another 2 more times, just the same, well, 1 more time with that same function, just slightly different values, just swap them around, and then we can blend these two together to give us this sort of pattern. Now we do have another FX map here, but that's literally just doing the same thing as we did with the other FX map. It's just changing the Y but not changing the X. So this one gets pushed into transform 2D, we're rotating it, and this one is also getting rotated and moved down a little bit. And then we can blend those two together, and that gives us our pattern here. The only thing missing is this line, so then we need to invert this and get it ready for the line. So once that's inverted, we can then put it into a blend node and put it on a multiply, and then we just push a line in here as we have many times before, and then that will give us our line. Next we want to sort of blend in a min darken of our grey, the same sort of grey as these other panels here, so it doesn't stick out too much and not too little. And then we can put it in our tile sampler, and that's when we have completed our third panel. Now with that being done, we can now plug that into our tile sampler and then start blending those together and see the sort of finished result, as well as colouring it and all that kind of stuff. But I wouldn't really recommend that if you are planning to use this in Painter. We kind of don't really want to be running all these nodes at the same time, because it's going to limit your ability to add more materials into Painter if one material is taking up all the memory. So what I'm going to do is take you through what I do for my sort of panel textures and how you can optimize them, as well as make it easier to expose values for the user. So first you want to do is create 3 output nodes here. So I've just named this one panel 1, panel 2, panel 3, and then I've just connected each panel to those outputs doesn't really matter what you put into where, just put them in. Next, you want to export out the bitmaps, and then make sure you go to where you're saving it to. Then we want to create a new graph and open up that graph. Once the graph is open, you then want to drag in your bitmaps that you just exported. Make sure you click on the link option rather than the import option, because we want the graph to update these bitmaps every time we make a change to the main Star Wars room panels sort of graph, which is your main big graph. So every time we make a change to that and export out the bitmaps again, as long as the directory is still the same, we haven't changed it, then this one will change with it. So that gives you the most flexibility. Now you're going to need at least 2 tile generators, this one and this one. I've got 4, that's only because I exported half the shape opposed to both the entire panel, and I've just sort of created the entire panel like this. So if you want to avoid having 4, you can just create this sort of section here in your main panel graph. But if we take a look at the sort of main tile generators and what they do, this one is the main shape changer. So everything to do with the tiling and changing the size and everything that we want to expose to the user happens here. So this is like the parent tile generator. Now this other tile generator is the emissive tile generator. So this is like the child of this tile generator. Every time we make a change to this one, we want this tile generator to mimic it and follow it. Because if you take a look at the tile amount here, if I reset its value, you'll notice that now, because it's at 16, this one's at 3, so it's not going to match up. We can manually do it, but no one wants to do that if they don't have to, you know? So what we can do is we can just expose it and pick this one, and it will match up correctly. Another thing that I have exposed for the user over here is we're using a distribution map here, and we can use the distribution map to sort of change what panel is where. So if we jump into the exposed features, you'll see I've got one called pattern order, and if we just change the default to say 2, you'll notice this one moves to the center now and this one gets pushed to the right. So that's very fun and useful. So if we just take a look at how we can sort of make that, we just grab a gradient linear and we just put the tile into 1, and then we just use gradient maps to sort of change the coloring positioning, and then we push it into distribution map over here. When we come into the tile sampler, we want to make sure the pattern input is set to 4, and then use the put it on distribution map. So that means it's going to use that input and work correctly. Plug your patterns into the correct spots. I tried putting it on 3, for some reason it stopped working if you don't have this extra pattern input. I think it's something to do with the black value not getting picked up, so I think the 4th pattern sort of does something to do with that. I'm not particularly sure why, but it works with 4 patterns, so I'm not going to complain. So that one just gets plugged into your normal map as normal, and you plug it into your output and so forth. Same with this one over here. You want to make sure you plug your distribution map into the other tile sampler's distribution map section, and it is exactly the same as this one, so you can literally just duplicate this and put it over here. Now in order to create the emissive sort of color, we want to make sure we grab our tiled version of this shape, and we want to just push it through a histogram scan, and we're going to crunch these values so it sort of gives us a nice white and black sort of mask sort of thing. We don't want the emissive to be coming in through these lines, so all I'm doing here is just masking out these lines here. So you see now they're disappearing and now they're all gone. So now that we have a shape looking like this, we can invert that grayscale, and now we have the insides of these sort of light panel things here. And then we just push that into our pattern input where it sort of mimics whereabouts it is on this one. So I've both got them plugged into 2, so we're plugging into pattern 2. That just goes into a gradient map. You can pick the sort of colors you want. Make sure that you have a on this sort of section, make sure you set it to opaque so you don't color in any of these other sections. And then we push that into our emissive output, and that's emissive sorted. So the height one's just very simple. We're just using a normal to height and then plugging it to the height, and then we're using an ambient occlusion from that normal to height to create our AO. The only thing sort of left to do here is sort of roughness and color. You can kind of have free reign on this because it's like every reference I've sort of seen, the color sort of varies very slightly, so it's kind of up to you. I went for a sort of a darker sort of bluish grey kind of look and went with that. As for the roughness, it's kind of just a generic blend of different grunges and then pushed on, just make that sort of more generic look, because we want to make sure when we push it into Substance Painter, we give the artist full freedom when he wants to add, like if there's like a blaster mark on the wall or something like that, then he can do that. And then once you do that, then you are completely done. So I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next YouTube tutorial. Please leave a comment on what you'd like to see next. I'm thinking I might do maybe a forestry floor or something like that. We'll see how we go. So thanks for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.